Hello TBE family, and welcome to the TBE podcast, where we share thought-provoking stories, strategies, and ideas, as well as engage with insightful leaders from a wide range of fields and businesses within South Africa. If the topics of entrepreneurship, business, startups, property, marketing, or finance interest you, then you've tuned in to the right place. On today's episode, we are talking about helping Africa invest smarter. In studio with me today, we have Marc Ashton, Chief Executive Officer at Decusatio. Marc, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thanks very much for having me.
So, Marc is an experienced financial journalist, having worked for fin24.com, been editor of finweek for 3 years, and run JSE-listed media group Moneyweb. Marc has always been passionate about the world of finance and investment and sharing entrepreneurial stories. So hopefully one or two of our questions, we get to look into those stories today.
Looking forward to it.
That'll be interesting. Apart from his role as CEO at Decusatio, Marc runs a medical technology startup called Dynamic Body Technology, which was nominated for the GAP Innovation Award, as well as a finalist in the MTN App of the Year competition. Marc, I'm going to jump straight into question one. You ready to go?
Go for it.
Awesome. So today is all about South African entrepreneurs.
Yep.
That's what we're talking about. And I love your quote, when entrepreneurs succeed, South Africa succeeds. I feel like it's the perfect way to start off episode 10. So where does your passion for helping South African entrepreneurs come from?
So, I've always been passionate about starting small businesses. I actually dropped out of high school in Standard 9, so I didn't go the traditional education route. And so you always had to get out there and see how you could, would you be able to build a business? You weren't going to be able to get a formal employment route. And I started a couple of small businesses along the way and crashed a few businesses as well. And ironically, that actually ended up putting me into my first job in media, which was actually with Succeed magazine. My wife got tired of me being gainfully unemployed and trying to run businesses. So after we blew up one business, she said, no, it's time for you to go get a job. So I didn't have any idea about what I wanted to do. So I applied to be a journalist for Succeed magazine. Was there for a bit, moved to Fin24, became editor of finweek for 3 years. And then I ran Moneyweb for 3 years before it was delisted from the JSE. So, I've always had a passion for following entrepreneurial stories, entrepreneurial businesses. And when I left Moneyweb, I kind of had this idea that I wanted to build a consulting firm that would effectively assist entrepreneurs raising capital, because in my head at the time, that was really the challenge that needed to be solved. Okay. And very quickly you realize lots of entrepreneurs want money, nobody qualifies for it. It's very hard to raise early stage capital for a small business. And we started to kind of look at this and say, well, actually, where is the challenge? The challenge lies in this access to market space. Anyone who runs an entrepreneurial small business knows the hardest challenge is finding clients, retaining them, and not being squeezed out by bigger competitors. So this whole access to market space really kind of, to me, became a really interesting thing to look at. And, clients are effectively your cheapest form of funding. So, instead of going getting loans from the bank and borrowing from friends and fools and family, there will always be a cost to those. But if you can service a client and do your job well, then you've got a business. And so we kind of pivoted. We do some of the kind of assisting entrepreneurs access certain types of finance. But for us, we do a lot more work in the access to market space, which could be everything from assessing their business development strategies through to their triple BE consulting, building some of the enterprise development projects in that space. So, yeah, it's always fun to look and see. I wake up in the morning and I do everything from work on a sanitary pad manufacturing business through to a medical technology startup. Pick something. We get to see different faces and opportunities each day.
That's actually incredibly exciting. And I can see that you're passionate because you came from it, right? Yeah.
So I think there's running a business is lonely. I think I always look at this kind of that period, 23rd to the 27th of the month, where you're kind of hoping the money from your clients is going to arrive. You hope you're able to pay your staff at the end of the month. Yes. And until you've actually lived through it, you can't really associate with it. My wife and I had this discussion quite a lot because we originally went into business together, and it led to so much personal strain. We just couldn't actually work well together because we we're so obsessed about this business. And when when a business isn't going well, you're both dragged down. There's nothing that you can do to lift each other up because you're living and dying by this entity. But I think that it hardens you. You become attuned to what a small, the challenges that entrepreneurs and small business owners go through. And yeah, it's fun. And I think there's always an opportunity to do something to stimulate the sector. I mean, I think it is nice to see innovators and guys doing well for themselves.
It sounds like you have an incredibly unique experience that you can use to connect with the entrepreneurs you're trying to help.
So it is interesting, but at the same time, one of the you can't save everybody, and this is one of the things. When I started out, everybody wanted to do coffee all the time, and I think this kind of consulting space is always a very unique thing. But when we started out, everybody wanted to do coffee, and everyone wants to talk about their business idea and how can I get help doing this and how can I raise money. And you've got to actually be quite choosy about it, because we all know failure rates around entrepreneurs are incredibly high, and there's those that are building businesses versus those that are simply subsidized consultants for it. And I think a lot of people build consulting businesses rather than building out a full-blown business. And you've got to pick and choose to make sure that you work on projects that are actually going to be sustainable. And it's you're never going to get them all right, but it is nice to be able to kind of move up the value curve and see some of these businesses really starting to deliver and grow. And especially post-COVID, I think that's a very unique experience that any business owner has gone through over the last year. And I think you're only starting to see the effects of it 3 years down, just how much strain guys had to go through to maintain and keep their businesses heads above water.
Yes, to make it through the pandemic.
Yep.
Eh? I'm sure you've had a lot of, I would say, insight into that because of the kind of work that you're in.
Yeah, so we do quite a lot of work with the Youth Employment Service as well. We were doing a lot of their business development when we started out, and it was really interesting to see. It's this it's a fantastic incentive. It comes out of the DTIC, but you have to go and talk to these businesses about will you actually go and create youth jobs at a time when the economy's come to a screeching halt. And there were some very interesting discussions, whether it was big corporates, small entities. Everyone went through an incredible challenge, and it's nice to start seeing a bit of light at the end of the tunnel.
It really is. It really is. So I want to maybe take to a follow-up. You were speaking about access to market and access to finance, and that's where we're going with these next questions. So maybe just a little bit of context around the question. Decusatio is a consultancy which helps entrepreneurs tackle the twin challenges of access to finance and access to market, which was just what you were talking about. And I would love to understand these challenges from your perspective in a little bit more detail, sure. Starting with access to finance. Sure.
So, as I said, I think guys often, we look at the US, we look at Israel, and we have the startup culture where you can go build a business, raise capital very quickly. People are prepared to take chances on you. South Africa is very different. You crash a business once, your credit record will be stuffed you really are going to feel that pressure. But you also, psychologically, people see you as a failure. Whereas in the US, when businesses fail, it's a stripe on the back to say you tried something, and let's go and build something else now. And I think we don't have that. We don't have that culture, the same culture of build and try. When I was at Media 24, Koos Becker was always talking about, fail fast, build businesses, see what you could build out.
Yes, but fail forwards.
Fail forward. But I think you can only really do that in South Africa if you are linked to a corporate. Corporates are more likely to create the kind of SMEs down the line because they've got the balance sheet to take some risk. I use the example of Discovery all the time. Discovery today is a very good entrepreneurial success story, but the reality is it was founded off a single major banking client.
Wow.
And it becomes, but would a new entrant have been able to build an insurance business or medical aid business in quite the same way if there hadn't been that access to that one major client that would get them going? And so, raising capital for small business is incredibly challenging. If you think about it, if you add up, and there was a who listed Opfest. These guys are just listed on the Cape Town Stock Exchange. I think they raised about 50 million. But if you look through their financials, they've spent nearly 20 to 30% of the cost of their raise just to market themselves, to promote themselves. Raising capital is incredibly expensive in the South African context. There's not easy money, apart from maybe looking at the enterprise development space.
Okay.
So it's very difficult to raise finance in South Africa. There are some nice fintechs that we work with that are coming through now that will assist you with things like working capital solutions. So that's kind of where our sweet spot is. You're looking for a business that's got a bit of track record. Things like your SARS, assisting you with SARS repayments, equipment finance, that kind of thing. So we can do those things for those entrepreneurs. But kind of traditional startup finance, very limited in South Africa. And I think that you've got to find ways around that in terms of this kind of access to finance challenge that is there.
It sounds like you've positioned your company extremely well if it's difficult for companies to find access to finance.
Yeah, I think it is changing. I mean, I think what's nice is when you apply for finance, you've got to fill in a whole lot of documents. Your tax has to be up to date, your 3 years of your bank statements, etc., etc. It's a very high friction process. And this is one of the reasons why when everyone comes saying, I need finance, I need 100 grand for this, 500 grand for that, banks were not traditionally geared to do that. As an enterprise development, there were a couple of organizations in that space that could assist relatively quickly. Fast forward 4 years to 2022, and you've got fintechs that are able to turn around those applications within 24 hours and money in your bank in 72 hours because of the use of technology. And to me, that's quite cool, particularly if you are looking for that kind of funding under 5 million rand. There's some quite cool solutions out there. And I think that it will make it easier to be an entrepreneur looking for finance. Early stage startup finance, still very, it's a very challenging space. But yeah, you learn to hustle when you don't have money. It keeps you efficient.
You do indeed. I have a follow-up question on something that you spoke about. Do you find that lots of your clients have that one really good client of their own that they can leverage as their initial access?
So it was a topic that came up in this week as well, was, people ask me, what's the first piece of advice that you give to somebody wanting to start a small business? And my immediate answer is don't. And it's ironic because of kind of the space we play in. But, I find that often the best way to go about building a business is, either if you're inside an organization or you've got a long-term contract with somebody, use that as your springboard and service that client really, really well, because they will give you the access to the next lot of opportunities. Starting a business from scratch, we had an energy client, and in fact we've got a corporate wellness client as well. They've gone for a year without being able to land a single client, and there's various reasons for that. But it can take a long time, and most people don't have the runway to go and keep them, to keep them afloat for a year while they try and get that one client. And I think in South Africa, people all say, yes, we love to support small businesses, but who have you worked for before? And the moment you that kind of start up the first time you're going out and pitching, and somebody says, well, what's your track record? Who have you spoken to? Who have you worked with? Who has actually trusted you? And you sit there and say, well, nobody's trusted me yet.
You need the portfolio and the relationship before you
relationship, and it becomes like this chicken and egg. So yeah, I think that's I believe very much that you do need that one anchor client, but don't become wholly dependent on them. Always look to that as your banker, but then make sure that every month you are kind of de-risking the business.
Yeah, I think from my own experience, a company can start with one client. It cannot live with one client.
Correct.
No matter how big they are.
Yeah, and look, you should, as I say, you don't want to take your eye off the ball in terms of managing and delivering for that client. And that client is not just the money that they put in the bank, it's the reputation that comes with it, it's the access to their clients. What are the ways that you can work together and collaborate? But yeah, for us, we had the same thing with the first year. We were very dependent on a single client. Now we've gradually spread it out, and it de-risks it.
Maybe before we move on to the next question, is there like a direct answer for, because I know that first 3 years, correct me if I'm wrong, but the first 3 years is like the most important. Not that the rest of your company's cycle isn't.
Yeah.
But what is that almost like first mountain in terms of life cycle for a business that you need to go through?
So it's quite a broad, there are a couple of things that we look at there. So, I mean, about 3 or 4 years ago, maybe a bit more, Suntum ran this campaign. It was 1,001 days. You're only really a small business once you reach 1,001 days. I'm sure it was
Wow.
Suntum.
Okay.
So that was their definition of, this is the businesses that they want to go and work with. Then, people start asking about like what constitutes an SME in South Africa. And I think it's one of these things that we need to have a bigger national debate about, because everyone says, yes, we want to support small businesses. And then it's okay, well, what's your definition of a small business? And I promise if you put 10 people in a room, you're going to get 10 different answers. And, one of the, I always use this stat when you try and talk about this kind of space. But, there are organizations that are designed to assist startups. Now, a startup, and I think I use Endeavour as a perfect example there. Their definition of a startup is a business that is delivering $1 million a year, and this is in a South African context. $1 million a year is their definition of a startup.
Interesting.
So you're looking at something between 12 and 15 million rand before you actually constitute an actual startup.
Would you align your definition to that definition?
And probably not as high. And look, I think that this is slightly different because it is a technology space. But when you turn over under 2 million, it's a lifestyle business, and it can be taken away from you incredibly quickly. You don't have the resources to go with it. But in terms of what are the entrepreneurs we should be helping, the small businesses that are doing 1 and 2 people, are, with absolute respect, are not necessarily going to move the dial in terms of the unemployment challenge, the breaking down some of the traditional vertical and horizontal integration that's happened in corporate South Africa. Bringing in smaller businesses that are kind of 10, 20, 30, 40 million rand is, I think, the sweet spot, because they have the ability to scale, and they have the ability to co-invest in projects, and they have the ability to create genuine chunks of jobs.
Okay. Thank you for that. So, access to finance, incredibly interesting. How does that lead into access to market?
So, as I say, when we kicked off this discussion, we were talking about the value of that client, how hard it is to get out there. And I know from, when you're running a small business, you're not the you're not the salesperson, you're not the finance guy, you're not the tech guy, you're everything all wrapped up into one.
All the hats.
All the time. And, I look at it is incredibly difficult if you don't have a genuine business development arm or sales arm to your business to be able to fill your pipeline. You're so busy, you win one, you fulfill the deal. And while you're doing this work, you haven't got somebody over here getting going and looking for the next piece of work. And so it becomes this challenge that you've got there. And, what we've been seeing, we've enjoyed doing this, so there are a couple of elements to, obviously, access to market. It could be everything from your BEE score through to having a sales team, through to corporate communications, if you're doing the kind of the PR route. And what we try to do is build out a strategy for you to be able to say, here's how we're going to go and do it. Either you can run with it on your own, or we will work with you. In some cases, we're running a program at the moment with two of the mining clients at the moment, and effectively we've dropped into each of these smaller businesses that they are funding, a bookkeeper, so we can get one of the biggest challenges you see with small businesses is their compliance. They can't, they haven't got their SIPS is not up to date, they've been deregistered, they haven't filed their tax return. And the moment they go and apply to do a tender or go and contract or go and sign up for a major client, they say, please, you can send us your BE certificate and your tax PIN. And you're like, well, I'm not compliant.
It's easy to be unaware of all of those small details that are so crucial. Hey?
Yeah, so we'll drop an accountant into there, and then they'll either have a kind of an innovation consultant, or they will have a business development or marketing consultant that will work with them. And we'll kind of guide them along the way. And I mean, we've had some nice success with that. I think, as I said right up front, it's lonely running a business. But when you've got a couple, somebody you can actually bounce ideas off. And, corporate South Africa comes in for a lot of criticism, but in terms of their approach to small businesses. But when you see programs like that where they genuinely want to see the enterprise development beneficiaries succeed, they genuinely want to see small businesses actually contributing to the ecosystem, it makes a huge difference.
I see. So maybe in terms of your capabilities as a company,
Mm.
because I saw from researching you have quite an impressive team.
Getting
So
there.
maybe, yeah, it'll be nice to know how you started out as maybe a 1 or 2 person and how you've grown to the team you are today.
Cool.
And then a little bit of detail about maybe specific services under marketing.
Sure. So, I mean, when I started out, I mean, obviously started out with myself, and then I'd brought in somebody that was assisting with some of the admin. And actually, the person I've got one of the ladies that now is my effectively head of operations. It's actually a really cool story. Now, to me, she's been pivotal to changing how this business has been put together. But she had been doing a job that wasn't necessarily where her passion lay. So she came and she said, look, she'd like to part-time work with me just so that she can put something on her CV that says, I'd like to go down this path, which was very much in the marketing space.
Okay.
And for 6 months, she was, she just got stuck in, and it was very informal. And today she runs the operations, from a client perspective, and manages the team on a day-to-day basis. But that growth of that team has been it was a transition from being a one-man band to being a broader business. And I think that you asked earlier about when are you a business. I think when the business can carry on without you as the founder, I think that's quite an interesting tipping point, and I get quite excited about that. And then over time, look, I mean, like all small businesses, you got to watch the bottom line. But we've looked for people that have got high potential. I mean, it's very much a woman-managed business, but we've always looked for kind of high potential people. There's people with innovation, branding, social impact, legal skills in there, and we've gone and built that little team. And hopefully, they find their own way in the world, and some will stay with us, and some will go on to bigger and better things.
It's awesome to know that people have the space to grow in their capability and their roles and responsibilities in your business.
Yep.
That's always a really exciting thing for me to hear.
Yeah, I think it's like, I didn't know. I mean, people ask me, what do you want to be when you're grown up? And like, I still am, 41, and I don't know what I want to be when I'm grown up.
I'm still growing up.
I'm still growing up.
Yeah.
And I do know I probably don't want to go back and work in a corporate. But when you're 20 something, you don't know what, you're starry eyed. You think that there are, the world will kind of all fall into place, but it is cool. Like every now and then you bring somebody in. One of the ladies was doing a press release, and her first press release got published, and you can just see like a light bulb went on. It was like, cool, I can do this. It's an achievement. And I think those kind of things, every time you see that, and they did it without somebody actually supervising them or managing them,
That's special.
It's cool. I think there's something very awesome about that.
You're in the right place if you can experience that. Hey?
And people are going to be the make or break of your business. One bad hire will cost you. I mean, I'm sure we've all done the CCMA thing, or kind of had to go through that tension of letting somebody go. Mm-hmm. And it is difficult, and it's hard, and it is. But and I think this has become a big issue in South Africa, is people are almost too scared to hire other people, especially small businesses, because they are worried about the labor law consequences. And say, but I'm just hustling to get going here. I don't want to be penalized for the fact that I created a job along the way.
Yeah, so that actually gives me a spontaneous question, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
It sounds like you've gone through hiring incredible people and maybe hiring 1 or 2 people that didn't fit the position. How would entrepreneurs know whether it's a good fit or not? When you're sitting in an interview talking to someone ready to fill a role, maybe 1 or 2 questions to ask.
So I mean, I'm a bit impulsive, and it's actually one of the big changes that we've had along the way. But when one of my, I think it was our third hire, was one of the girls I met at a bar, and she was a waitress, and she just, like, to me, she had like this awesome personality. She was just this person that was always lights. She was just that person who lit up a room when she came. And I said, you got potential. I'm going to come. You must come work for me. And then she arrived, and then she said, I got a friend, and the friend arrived, and the third friend arrived. And look, they, one's gone on to do a grad program with Investec. The other one is still with us. But you almost can't. One of the things that we've taken away from me is the fact that recruitment. I can't, because I'm impulsive. I say that's a nice person. Let's do something with them. Whereas there's got to be a process to it. Skills, have references. We've just done one of the projects down in Richards Bay. We've had to do a full recruitment thing as setting up a solar plant down there. And you realize how important it is to put in the legwork up front, identify the candidates. Are they going to be a good fit? Sound them out over a period of time. Don't be impulsive about fulfilling that role. So, yeah, I mean, impulsiveness is probably not a good thing when it comes to hiring.
It doesn't sound like it. Although sometimes you can't, right? You can't get away from it. It happens. It's spontaneous, and then you work through it.
No, exactly. I mean, I think that's the joy of a small business. Like you do fly by the seat of your pants sometimes, and you make decisions, and then you got to live and die by them.
The best lessons come from that experience.
Exactly.
Eh?
Yep.
I have one more follow-up question. Soft skills versus actual hardened experience. What do you think is more important when you're sitting across from someone?
It's a good question. I mean, I think that what has been very interesting is, a lot of our team are relatively young, and you start to realize the soft skills that were lost during 2019, 2020. You get graduates that have never actually spoken to people. They've never been in a work environment before. We interviewed somebody once, and they, they're nice on paper, and they said, do I have to come into the office from 8 to 5? Yes. And they said, but that doesn't sound like, when do I have my breaks? And it's, I'm being a little bit facetious, but the reality is that they are, there was, this work from home culture, it has its place. But a lot of people, there's an accountability thing that also needs to come in there. And a lot of younger people, particularly those that graduated in that kind of 2019, 2020 period, they are short on soft skills and actual workplace experience. Hard skills, what surprises me is that a lot of graduates they've never had to apply what they've learnt. There's a disconnect between what they're taught in school, in varsity, versus what the workplace actually requires. And so actual assessments of hard skills is quite important as well. I mean, and there could be simple things like understanding how to send an email. It sounds crazy, but a lot of people don't know how to
crucial,
use Outlook. How to set up a meeting. These kind of Excel, Word, whatever it is, these kind of skills, they've never had to actually use them in a practical workplace experience.
In that professional environment.
Drafting emails, communication skills. I think there's so much of that kind of mashes together. But, if you've got a small business and your staff are sending out kind of casual mails or littered with typos, it can be it reflects on you, and you have to try and explain to each of your team members everything that goes out doesn't reflect on you, it reflects on us collectively.
The company as a whole.
And that's quite an interesting dynamic that plays out, particularly when you've got a young team.
That was an interesting answer. Maybe to keep this episode short and sweet for our listeners, I'd like to just go into our last question. And being on a TBE podcast, we have to end on this question. So I would love to find out what your relationship is with TBE.
Cool.
What office are you at? I know they have offices all over the country that are amazing. So where are you? Where are you based?
Cool. So my actual involvement with TBE goes a long time before I actually became a tenant with TBE. I've known Alon Reyes for quite a long time, and he actually introduced me to David, who CEO of TBE. And Alon always said, if you ever want to emulate an entrepreneur, see what David is doing. He's one of the most passionate, hardworking, hard grafting kind of guys. Go and see what David does as a business, and you'll understand what entrepreneurship is actually about.
Wow!
And coming from somebody like Alon, that tells you about the quality of how highly he holds David. And I'd met David a couple of times. We've done a couple of functions together. The world is relatively small. And at the end of last year, we just started saying, we'd had some shared office space, but we were growing, and we felt that there was something more that we, needed from a brand perspective. And I said to him, look, I'm doing a lot of work in Rosebank at the moment. Could I come and see your TBE offices in Rosebank? And, we took one look at it and the team fell in love with it. And they said, this is where we're going. And I gulped a little bit when I signed the lease. But it really is. And I mean, one of the things that's really interesting, when we kind of moved in January, a lot of people were saying, but why are you buying, it's still bouncing out of the COVID pandemic, economy's still recovering, why are you investing in office space? And I just said, look, it's nice to bring people here. You've got in a professional environment, you attract the good people when they come to a good working environment. And funny enough, now with all this load shedding that's going around, my network is expanding because everyone says, please can we have a meeting at your place because you've got coffee, you've got Wi-Fi, you've got generators.
Yes, those hot desks have become hot,
Yep.
right, during load shedding.
Absolutely. And we've got a closed office space, we've got boardrooms.
Nice.
It's just a sexy feeling to it. And you can just see when you do a function there, clients want to come there. They feel safe, they feel welcome, and there's just something intangible about that when it comes to relationships.
The TBE office culture kind of like blends perfectly with their tenants' culture.
Yeah.
I feel like it completely enhances your work experience. And to be honest, like the art is a really nice bonus on my side.
Yeah, I think it just works, and I think it's by entrepreneurs for entrepreneurs, and I think that's just a cool thing to it.
That's a really nice line, by entrepreneurs for entrepreneurs. Yeah. Marc, it's been a pleasure having you with us today. I really appreciate you taking the time to share a bit about what you do and talk about entrepreneurs. Maybe as we end off, if someone listening to this podcast would like to get in touch with you and your team, what would be your preferred method?
So, I mean, we're available on most of the social channels. You can find us in, we always try and share what we're working on and what other people in our network are on. So there's Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Otherwise, pop me an email. It's nice and easy. Marc, M-A-R-C, at Decusatio, so it's DECUSATIO.co.za. And otherwise, come and visit us at TBE Rosebank.
Awesome. Well, from all of us here at the Business Exchange, guys, I'd like to thank you for listening. That's episode 10, and we will catch you on the next episode.